We know that in India, there is now a concern, like in other countries, that minorities are being oppressed. In terms of Hindutva, in terms of oppression of any minorities anywhere, I will certainly speak about it. We should recognize the state of Palestine immediately. We should immediately give access to humanitarian aid. We should ask for immediate ceasefire. We should stop selling arms to Israel.
Hello everyone, welcome to Maktoob. Today I am joined by Shockat Adam, one of the only two British Muslim MPs of Indian origin. In a seismic performance, he unseated one of the tallest figures of the ruling Labour Party, Jonathan Ashworth, in Leicester South seat, where he had a comfortable majority in successive previous elections. However, his victory was called sectarian, lack of integration into British society, not just by Jonathan Ashworth, but also by some of the Indian and British journalists and media outlets. Today, he'll be talking about all those issues. How do you respond to your critics who often describe your victory as sectarian or an indicative of the lack of integration into the British society?
The answer to your question is twofold. When they label somebody from my background, Indian origins, Muslim, and active in highlighting discrepancies in the British system, there's two things. One is just lazy journalism. If I'm being kind, it could be lazy. Secondly, it could be mischievous because they wish to label you as somebody that is separate from the rest of society. I've been fighting for equality for over 10 years now. And what I've really found that what the media and certain institution is trying to other you, to make you different from the rest of society. So hence my campaign, that was a natural thing they did. Some people labeled it as sectarianism, as these are the others, these are not part of the fabric of British society, and other journalists just jumped on lazily and addressed it in the same way. So to answer the second part of your question, there is certainly an element of society that wishes to ensure that anybody that is not of the conventional form of establishment is then somehow a little bit suspicious and can be a little bit unknown, and they work on the fears that people have around that, and they try to exploit that. Definitely.
Going through your works recently, since being the MP, do you believe that your work serves as a strong rebuttal for your critics who wanted to portray you negatively?
Yeah, look, what affects myself or my community that I originate from, people who are concerned about Gaza or human rights issue, they have the same problems as everybody else. Housing, healthcare, education, opportunities for our youth. They're concerned about the environment. We share all the same concerns. So therefore, why would I not take up these cases as well? It wouldn't make any sense not to. So I am being what I am being. If that is a rebuttal, then that is a rebuttal. But that was the lazy presumption that people made, that I wouldn't be a part of these things. Of course I would. When people voted for me democratically, they wouldn't have just voted if they thought I was only representing one issue. Yeah. That wouldn't make sense. I have to represent all their concerns, and things like housing, children's schools, opportunities, youth, crime is important.
Yeah. Your journey from being an activist and professionally an optometrist, then being a British parliamentarian. Could you please explain or share your journey?
Yeah, it's not a conventional journey I've taken into politics. Up till now, I have never even been a member of a political party. But as you quite rightly said, for over 10, maybe 12 years now, I have been a community champion. Okay, and one of the things I've always tried to do is build bridges between different communities, because we know anywhere in the world where these bridges are broken and finger pointing and causing chasms and gaps between communities is destructive to everybody. So one of the main, if you look at the series, what brought me here, one of the first things, not solely, but one of the first things was Brexit. And it wasn't Brexit itself, but the language used around Brexit. Okay, it gave and empowered people who were openly racist, openly xenophobic, openly Islamophobic, openly racist to say things on national television because they were wearing a nice suit and shirt. They can get away with it, you know. And the language and rhetoric was so dangerous. After which we had the cost of living crisis, and the living crisis then was being blamed on people that came from abroad, immigrants. Words like, you know, swarms and hordes taking over our country, and everything was being blamed on other people. Then we had COVID, and our city, which I am a representative for, Leicester South, were kept in lockdown for a lot longer. And again, it was minorities that were being blamed. And, you know, we were almost forgotten. And so all of these things pointed to the direction that this country that is my home, this country that I love, this country my children were born into, it was not the country that I grew up in. And we saw that just 2 weeks ago or last week with all the riots that we were having in this country. You know, that if we do not challenge this, then this wonderful country of ours will no longer be the country that we once knew. Then the final straw was obviously the situation in Gaza, where we saw men, women, and children being massacred at a scale that we have never seen before. And we were being met by complete and utter silence, especially from those that we have trusted with our voice by voting for them in the past. And I think for me, that was the final straw and my ignition to go into the political spectrum.
Yeah, we will come to most of those topics. First, your entry or your election or your campaign has been largely described as something for Gaza. And on your victory speech, you said this is for Gaza. And yet the people of Gaza are still going through horrific sufferings. Do you believe that the British government is complicit in the genocidal onslaught? And in your view, what immediate steps should the British government take to stop what many are calling one of the greatest humanitarian catastrophes in history?
I think what we are witnessing, and we have all been witness to it, is exactly as you say, of recent times, one of the worst humanitarian, man-made disasters that we're facing. We as a country have a responsibility, probably more than most, because of the formation and the situation and the longevity of the issues that have been happening in the Middle East. Now, can we resolve it with a wand? Of course we can't. You know, we do not have that power anymore in the world, but we still have a lot of sway and we still have a lot of influence. And I feel that we as a country, regardless of what the outcome is, should be on the right side of history. You know, we should recognize the state of Palestine immediately. We should immediately give access to humanitarian aid. We should ask for immediate ceasefire. We should stop selling arms to Israel. We should ensure that those that have been guilty or should be sent to an international criminal court to see if there has been any war crimes being committed. We as a country has a moral responsibility for that.
Yeah. And coming to the recent, thuggery that we have seen in the streets of Britain across the country, the far right incited violences against particularly a community. You have written to Home Secretary along with other pro-Gaza MPs requesting a meeting to discuss the issues that impact the community. Have you managed to meet the Home Secretary, or do you believe the government is addressing this issue effectively?
There's a duality. I welcome the brisk justice that was dished out to those that were perpetrators. Okay, but that treating the acute problem at the time is not addressing the cause. Okay, in order to address the cause, we have to really be looking into what is responsible for it, and one of it is political rhetoric. Politicians who have been utilizing terminology which has inflamed these tensions. When you describe people who come to this country as immigrants, as hordes, as swarms, yeah, And when you have previous politicians who are saying that there is parts, former Home Secretaries in fact, saying that there are parts of these countries that are run by Islamists, and there are other politicians saying there's areas of this country that are controlled by Muslims and there's no-go areas for non-Muslims. When you have a previous Prime Minister who described Muslim women as bank robbers and letterboxes with no repercussions, all of those things, irresponsible language, semantics, leads to where we are. And our irresponsible media headlines and media stories always criminalizing, demonizing people from outside the country, you get what you saw in the last 2 weeks. That's the first bit. I have, in my experience, I'm a Muslim, I'm a man of color, brown man. My expertise is in tackling Islamophobia, tackling hate crime. We wrote to the Home Secretary because the Muslim community were obviously the target of a lot of this anger and a lot of this thuggery and a lot of this brutality, you know, people being dragged out of cars being burnt. Yet we have still not had the audience with the Home Secretary, which I find very, very telling. And I will not give up, and I will continue to ask to speak to her because I care and love this country, and we must ensure it's a safer place for our children.
Do you think that there is an immediate need of legalizing the criminalization of Islamophobia?
I think first of all we need to have an adopted definition of Islamophobia. That should be, so we need to tackle this judicially as well. You know, at the moment there's different laws. When you commit an if you commit a racist crime to an anti-religious crime, there's different technical differences there. We need to equalize both. We need to have an adoption of the Islamophobia, APPG definition of Islamophobia.
Okay. Your city has witnessed in the last couple of years similar kinds of thuggeries and street violence that often rightly described Hindutva-inspired violence. Do you believe addressing this issue should be a priority, especially now that a new government in place?
This city is a beacon. This city is a role model. This city is a template of different religions and different communities living together. For those who may not be aware, that this city is the first city in this country where the minority are the majority. Okay. Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs have lived harmoniously in this city, along with our Christian and people of no faith and our Jewish community for the last 60 years, almost, over half a century. Okay. We have recently seen there have been people who have caused division between faiths. Okay. And some of this has international tinges of playing out in our streets, of what happens in our subcontinents plays out on the streets of Leicester. Okay. So therefore, this is an issue that we have absolutely no choice but to deal with. Not as victim blaming, not finger pointing, but to build bridges. And in order to do that, we have to accept there's an issue. We have to have honest conversations in order to ensure, like I said in my previous question, that our children have a much secure and safer future. If we do not address this issue, if this government does not address this issue, we are kicking the can down the road for further trouble in the future.
Do you demand that there should be a change in the chief of the Independent Inquiry Commission into violence?
Going back to that, it goes without saying. I have called it out that when you don't have the trust of all parties, then you cannot have an inquiry that its results will be effective. And when you have an individual who has made comments very recently that can be deemed as Islamophobic, when you already had mistrust of a certain section of the community, then it only leads to further mistrust, and therefore we must have a truly independent judicial inquiry.
Do you think Hindutva specifically is playing its role on the streets of Britain? And do you consider it as a significant issue? Additionally, will you raise your concerns on that issue in Parliament? And Hindutva-inspired violence against or the persecution of minorities, including Muslims and Christians in India, in Parliament?
In order to answer your first question, when you have a situation that we faced in this specific city. I can't talk about anything else. You have to look at it as a whole. There were socio-economic factors. There was a lot of factors at play there. But one of them was certainly overseas-inspired violence. Okay? In terms of Hindutva, in terms of oppression of any minorities anywhere, I will certainly speak about it. We know that in India, there is now a concern, like in other countries, that minorities are being oppressed. Okay? And this has to be addressed by our existing government and must be spoken when our foreign minister goes to India.
On August 15, you wished India a happy Independence Day on the occasion of India's Independence Day, reflecting and connecting to the country. As someone of Indian origin, your election to the British Parliament should be a moment of pride for Indians. However, as I said earlier, some Indian media outlets have labeled you as a leader of an Islamist group, citing the conservative government's stance on men, with which you were associated earlier. Furthermore, the pro-Hindutva outlet Op India has called you anti-Indian as well. How do you respond to these allegations?
Yeah, that's again, that would probably go back to both lazy and mischievous journalism, because I am of proud Indian origin. Both my parents were born in India. I have visited India in the past and feel it as if it's my ancestral home. And as you are aware, India is home to over 220 million Muslims. And it is a country that belongs, I feel, to everybody who lives in there, as was the vision of its forefathers as a secular country. So I would feel that opinion is of a very minority. It is not who I am, and it is certainly opinions of that nature do not build bridges that I was telling you about earlier. It destroys bridges and it causes more disharmony in a world where we want harmony and unity. And that is one of the purposes that I'm standing, is because of language that can cause division. I don't know if you heard my maiden speech. I spoke about language we should use to build bridges. And without having interviewed me, having spoken to me, knowing my thoughts and feelings, I think we can certainly say that we can change that perception.
Yeah, we are honored to be the first Indian media outlets to interview one of the only two Indian origin Muslim MPs in the UK Parliament. As we conclude, what message would you like to share with our Indian audience?
No, thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for tuning in. I think we have within us the ability to be the change that we want to see. As an individual that wasn't a parliamentarian, now sitting on one of the hallowed corridors of Westminster, it takes belief, a belief to make this world a better place, and the belief and the ability to talk to everybody to ensure that we leave this world in a much safer place than we found it.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate your hard work, and we are looking forward to your contributions in the UK Parliament.
Thank you very much.